Hello, welcome back to the workshop. On today's episode, I am going to be reacting to blacksmithing and bladesmithing scenes from movies, TV shows, and games. So thank you for joining us as we get stuck in. If you're new here, despite not looking anything like a blacksmith, I am indeed one and have been doing it since I was a small child. But first, I want to let you know today's episode is sponsored by ShipStation, which allows you stress and hassle-free shipping for your business. And you can get a 60-day free trial of it at shipstation.com by hitting the microphone and typing in code FORGE. Let's get into the video. The first one that we're going to look at is from Conan the Barbarian. It's just opened into a scene in a workshop that looks like it was hundreds and hundreds of years ago, and this chap is asking what's more important when forging a blade, fire or ice. My first query here is how ice has anything to do with forging. Forging is the process of heating up a material and then using pressure, a hammer or a press, to move it around and displace it. You can't move around materials with ice. They need to be hot. Okay, he has just snapped this blade. If I was to hit a blade and snap it, that would indicate to me that the blade is too hard, because with hardness comes brittleness. So we'll see what they say about the fire and ice thing. Fire and ice together. Okay, that makes no sense. He's just dipped it into ice water. There's chunks of ice, and then now it's all on fire. I have no idea how this is possible. Ice doesn't catch on fire, 1. 2, the blade wasn't hot. And 3, there's no reason at all that ice has anything to do with the making of a proper blade. If you were to heat up a bit of steel and quench it in ice water, it would snap. So Conan, I'm very sorry, you got it wrong. Next up is The Lord of the Rings, The Return of the King. The reforging of Narsil. Okay, so this guy's just had his blade snapped in half. Ooh, wow, that sword has shattered. And it looks like there's more pieces than there were on the original sword. It is possible to reforge a broken sword. Typically, what I would do is similar to what we've done when we make something from a bunch of random other things. We made a hammer from nails, nail clippers from nails, is I would take the broken sword and then I would cut it into pieces, stack it together, heat it up to a near molten temperature, hammer it and forge weld it just like making Damascus. Okay, here we go into the forge. Instantly what I'm seeing here is 2 bits of steel that are red to orange. Forge welding requires steel that's a very high yellow in color, near to a white. At that point, the surface becomes almost molten, it becomes sticky, and the 2 bits of steel will fuse together. This is way too cold. The very tip here is a very dull red. It's almost black in color. That's not going to forge weld. You can end up with cracks. The blade is coming out of the fire. Okay, what is going on with this thing? They welded it together, and then now, in this next scene, it is broken again, and they're hammering behind the break. Next up, Season 8 of Game of Thrones. Okay, I like this setting. That's a very traditional-looking forge. Looks like they've got it powered with coke or coal. Some hot steel coming out of the fire. It is hot steel. The sparks coming off it are authentic. This all looks good so far. That right there is a 19th century style of anvil. I don't know when Game of Thrones would be set. Probably earlier than the 19th century. It's its own thing, its own version of time. Well, they probably didn't have Peter Wright-style London pattern anvils. You can tell because it's got this flat face here, and then a step, and then the round horn. Anvils of an earlier date than the 19th century or so would have been a lot blockier in shape and wouldn't have had quite the same accentuated body style as you see on Peter Wright anvils of the 19th century or the anvils that we designed, which are based on a lot of the popular London pattern anvils of the time as well. Here we go, Iron Man 1, Tony Stark building Mark 1. This is 2008. I first started blacksmithing in 2009, and I remember as an 11-year-old child then watching this film and going, that's not right, that doesn't make sense. But also being really chuffed to see blacksmithing in a movie. I haven't seen this film in a decade, so let's have a look. Okay, he's hammering on a bit of sheet metal on the horn of an anvil. He's doing this really annoying little double tap though, where he's hitting the workpiece and then lightly hitting it to set himself up for his next blow. That's something that a beginner blacksmith will do as they're trying to learn their confidence. The trouble with that is you lose a lot of energy, because if you let the anvil bounce your hammer up, the natural rebound will give you back 70% of your blow, and then you only have to do a little bit of work to lift it back up to the top of your swing. However, if you hit and then you restrain the rebound of the hammer to then lightly hit it, you're doing way more work. It's way more tiring. He's quenched it into some water. That makes sense. Sheet metal, it's going to be mild steel. I have no problems with that. I have to say, he must be an amazing blacksmith to have forged on an anvil a sheet metal helmet front like that. I once tried to do it. It didn't go very well. Looking at the finished piece there, that doesn't look like something that came off a blacksmith's anvil. You would require sheet metal working and armor making equipment to make that shape. So instead of an anvil, you'd be dealing with stakes that have a semicircular form, etc., etc. Oh, Peaky Blinders up next. This is gonna be good. This all looks quite authentic looking. You got a guy pounding on a horseshoe over there. I do just want to comment on his hammering technique there. It looks like he's using a little too much shoulder. You see he bends over and he pushes his shoulder down to accelerate the hammer. You know, you want to feel a little bit freer when you're hammering. You don't want that blow to come from that twisted shoulder, otherwise you're really crunched up. So you want to feel a little more free and loose while you're hammering. That's a forge welding temperature. He's got this finished looking horseshoe, and it's forge welding hot while he's smacking on it. You can tell that it's forge welding hot because it's throwing the sparks everywhere. There's sparks everywhere here. This guy is dealing with a bit of metal that's way too hot to make a finished piece. This ruins steel. Season 2 of Ragnarok, here we go. Oh, this is cool. This looks like a bit of bloomery iron. In the past, when people wanted to make iron from iron ore, what they would do is they'd have a big stack, and in it they'd start this really hot charcoal fire, and then they'd progressively pour in iron ore, more charcoal, iron ore. The burning process then converts that iron ore into iron, it dribbles down into the bottom, and you end up with what's called a bloom. Oh, that looks painful. Oh! Is that right in the cojones? So here we go back into the forge, and the anvil that they have here, this shape of anvil right here, it has a double horn, so it has a round horn and a square tapering horn. That is very much a Scandinavian style of anvil. It sounds like Ragnarok is set in Norway, so that's a plus on consistency and accuracy. Okay, he's put a piece of feather on a hot piece of metal. That might be a ritual of some sort. I don't think it's likely to actually do anything. So you can probably skip the feather on your next forge project. So they're now closing up that piece at a really low temperature. This isn't going to be the forge welding process. You will sometimes use a low temperature. Okay, what on earth? So in one moment it's a small bit of rectangle, and now it's a giant bit of square bar. Next up is Vikings, season 3. Okay, so it sounds like this stranger has come in and he's trying to convince them that their gods aren't the real god. And so now it sounds like there's a little bit of a challenge going on. There's gonna be a little bit of a competition. We're gonna find out who's the real deal. Okay, we've got a hot bar of steel coming out of the fire with a pair of flat bar tongs. Oh gosh, that's gonna hurt so much. God, the man's tough, he's walking. There is no way that this is possible. You wouldn't be holding a bar of metal like that without a horse and carriage behind you to carry your nuts. There is nobody on earth strong enough to withstand the pain that is going through this man's body right now. You would be seeing smoke coming from his hands. Oh, okay, good. Phew, here we go. That was just something that was going on in his mind. This is much more accurate. This is good. I'd like to see more smoke, but this is a much better representation of what happens if you have a hot bar of metal in your hands. I would see myself doing this. Ah! Another Game of Thrones, season 4 this time, opening with a lovely sword here. They're gonna melt this sword and turn it into 2. Okay, that's interesting. They're hammering off the guard. They're laying the sword in some sort of receptacle. This is inaccurate. Any sort of receptacle that was heating up a sword to this temperature itself would be glowing. They're also, for some reason, pouring it from one crucible into another crucible. The crucible they're pouring it into is very cold. It's not preheated, so it's going to be sucking heat out of that molten metal. And that's not smart. And now it's going into an open-topped mold. This makes no sense. And did you also say this is meant to be one sword's worth of material? No way is there that much molten steel coming from one single sword.
Well, I thought it was a great sword.
Even if it was a great sword, there's so much molten steel right there.
A great sword into 2 long swords.
Yeah, a great sword into 2 long swords. There's gallons of molten steel right there to make that happen. I could absolutely be wrong, and there is enough material for 2 swords there, so I won't contest that. I will, however, contest steel doesn't like getting cast in thin cross sections, and you can also see Lindy Beige's video to see his breakdown of why it makes no sense to be casting a sword in an open-topped mold. Here we go, Kingdom Come Deliverance. I think this is a game, and this is the sword forging scene. Oh, they've got a lovely guard, actually. There's some beautiful ornamentation on that. So they're going to be using a charcoal-powered forge. That's very accurate. I like the sound of that. I would say that forge bed is extremely wide. For the forging of a sword, you only need to heat up small little sections at a time, and In this day and age, everything would have cost a hell of a lot more money. Making charcoal was a big deal. They didn't have trucks to take it to you. You'd want to be very, very careful in how much charcoal you were using. Big, huge forges like that just waste a ton of fuel. So I'd really recommend they have a smaller fire pot. The hand crank bellows like this, that makes sense. That would be historically accurate. They've got a hot tang, and he is pushing the hot tang onto the grip. This is a historically accurate and relevant thing to do. The handle is made of wood. The tang is to final dimension. You burn away the material in the handle that stops the tang from fitting, and you have a handle that fits. Wonderful example of a medieval blacksmith workshop. So they're hammering the pommel onto the tang. They probably in reality would have had the tang come through the pommel, and then they would have riveted over the tang to hold the pommel in place. So there's a slight weird thing going on there. It just looks like he's doing a press fit onto the tang. Oh, here we go, Rambo. So judging by the sparks, Rambo's got a charcoal fire going. He's got a really wide bit of steel. Charcoal fires are quite scary to use because there are so many sparks. They get all over you, it's horrible. He's just quenched yellow hot steel into a tub of water. I imagine he's making a knife. That's a bad idea. You're gonna end up with a cracked workpiece. And on top of that, he then put it straight back into the fire. So you cool down your metal and then heat it up. It makes no sense. Don't do that. You're wasting energy. The Hunted. Okay, so he started a fire. He now has what looks like a bit of leaf spring. That's actually a pretty good thing to make a knife out of if you have nothing else. He's got an I-beam as an anvil. There is one downside to using an I-beam as an anvil, which is the nature of an I-beam is that most of it is unsupported, and so it's gonna flex and wobble around. If you have to use a makeshift anvil, I'd recommend just trying to find a big bit of round bar, a big axle or a big hydraulic ram, and stand it on end. It does look like he's got tongs though, and it looks like he's using a bar of steel as a hammer. There we go, that's his knife. Nice, good work. Here's one from the original Conan the Barbarian. Another open-topped mold! This doesn't make any sense. You cannot pour a sword into an open-topped mold and ever get a blade that is gonna be strong enough. You certainly cannot pour it in from the end because it's gonna be cooling as it goes. You're not gonna end up with a homogeneous chunk of metal. Right here, look at the tang. You can see exactly what I'm talking about. There is a gap where the metal did not cast into one solid piece. And now they're forging it. There's no point doing that. If you're gonna forge it, you forge it. If you're gonna cast it, you cast it. They've also got oil all over their anvil, which is just dangerous and serves no purpose whatsoever. And the finished blade looks very nice, but it would not have been possible with they're quenching it in a snow? I don't know about that. I will say, however, they made a beautiful sword at the end of it, so maybe open-top casting is the way we're gonna make our pieces in the future. Thank you guys so much for watching. Please let us know down below if there's any TV scenes and movie scenes that you'd like us to react to in the future. I'm very grateful for ShipStation for having sponsored this video. Let's tell you about them. ShipStation is a web-based software that integrates with whatever selling platform it is that you use to allow small business owners like yourself and I to have the easiest shipping experience possible. When you're running a business and you're focusing on creating good products, it's important you double down on what you're good on, and that's the actual creativity, not the shipping. So if you're wasting time driving to the post office, handwriting out labels, or copy and pasting addresses, you're not doing the thing that you're best at and the thing that actually brings in the money. So you've got to make sure that those processes are as efficient as possible, and that's why we absolutely love ShipStation, and that's how the Alec Steele Co. ships all of our orders. No matter how much you sell, ShipStation can help you ship your products, and you'll be able to ship them cheaper than before because by using ShipStation, you get access to their discounted rates with major carriers like FedEx, UPS, etc. On top of that, you can use their powerful automations to make shipping a one-click operation, and it really doesn't take a lot of time at all to get set up. And so please go get started saving money and saving time on your shipping for your business by going to shipstation.com, hit the microphone and type in code FORGE. You'll be getting a 60-day free trial. Thank you guys so much for watching. See you on the next one. Bye-bye.